I was thrilled to be asked, actually, and I thought, oh God, this is a bit like This Is Your Life. And I thought, I'll find a photo and I'll put that up. And then it struck me that probably the vast majority of people on this webinar today won't have a clue who this chap is, Michael Aspel, in case you're wondering. And he would surprise people with a big red book and say, "This is your life." So it's felt a little bit like that for me, except I've had to make the red book myself, and it wasn't a surprise. So I'm going to take you through my big red book now, and I hope that you will find some of it interesting, and we can have some questions afterwards. So this is me, blank sheet of paper. I started work at WRC back in 1989, right when the water industry was privatised. I was interviewed just before privatisation, and I was in there right at the beginning of that. So it feels 5 minutes ago in one respect, and actually quite a long time ago in other respects. So I was right in there at the beginning, and WRC became a private company at the same time that the water industry was privatised. Previous to that, we were a government research lab, and we were privatised so that we could stay doing that sort of research element, but provide impartial advice, services, consultancy to both the regulator, the newly formed regulator, the National Rivers Authority, and also the newly formed water companies. And so I applied. I responded to an advert in the New Scientist. I liked the frog. I thought, oh, I could work for a company with a frog as a logo, and I got the job. And one of my first jobs, when we were first privatised, we were a very, very different organisation, and we undertook a lot of very long-term, big research projects. And one of the first research projects that I got involved with was the coastal sewage research. And one of my first jobs was looking at fecal coliform contributions to the coast. And I used to take some maps and work out catchment boundaries with a little wheel pen, and look at census data and calculate farming census data, look at that and calculate loading from livestock and how that might get into the coast through short and long sea outfalls. And ultimately that work fed into the Marine Treatment Design Guide, which looks at designing outfalls. And then I did a bit of river hydraulic flooding work. I've got some pictures. There's a nice picture of an outfall somewhere. And I did a bit of surveying in my early career, and we did a couple of jobs looking at hydraulic capacity in rivers. And the two memorable jobs for me, one, I had a job doing some work in Edinburgh, modelling Gogger Burn, which runs under Edinburgh Airport runway, and we were escorted. We had one security guard escort us, and we were taking cross sections practically next to the runway, and you know, just wouldn't do that these days. But it was perhaps not quite so tight on health and safety then, but it was good fun. It was good fun. So I got my feet dirty and went into the rivers and did that. That really gave me that grounding and that understanding. What I thought I would do with this presentation is actually walk you through in relation to the AMP cycle, the asset management planning cycle, and just give you highlights of what I did for each cycle. So I'm going to start off with AMP1. In AMP1, a lot of what I did was using a number of river modelling tools, environmental modelling tools, and AMP1 was very much focused on getting infrastructure right, getting sewage treatment works, permitting correct, or trying to bring it up to speed, and looking at the investment that was required. So I got my first experience of using SIMCAT, which is the Environment Agency permitting tool, helping water companies understand how they needed to upgrade their sewage treatment works to provide and to protect water quality in the river. I also helped form the Urban Pollution Management Programme, which was a 10-year research project which culminated in 1994 with the release of the UPM manual version 1. And we did a lot of modelling work that went into that. It was a huge project, as I said, went over 10 years, and I was involved in some of the demonstration project works. And I did cut my teeth on the water quality modelling side using Mike 11. And again, these were really big projects, and it was really good fun, again, being involved in developing that procedure and producing that manual. So that was AMP1. In AMP2, I had, as a period in AMP2, I had the opportunity to go to the States. We had a small office in Philadelphia, and I went out there to help doing some sewer hydraulic modelling. Back in those days, I think it was using HydroWorks, so it wasn't InfoWorks. So I did a little bit of HydroWorks modelling, and that was a really interesting time, because it gave me an understanding of how modelling and assessment is undertaken in different countries. So that was really exciting and a great opportunity. And then later on in AMP2, another standout project for me was doing a UK Word project to look at producing some information, public information, and how on the sort of things to not flush down the toilet. So how do you preserve that sewage treatment, the pipe integrity, by not abusing the sewer network? And we produced a series of leaflets, presentations, and some video. And it gave, again, it was really good, because it gave me the opportunity to work with a professional film crew, professional scriptwriter, and John Craven, and of Country File fame, for those of you who don't know who John Craven is. And he was a figure from my childhood. He's been around forever and barely looks any different. But he was really good. He fronted up the video, and it was really good fun working with him. And we did a lot of filming around here, and it was a bitterly cold day, and I was holding the umbrella up for Mr. Craven in the snow. But that's really stuck in my mind, and it was good fun. The other things that are involved within that AMP cycle were developing the next version of the UPM manual. UPM 2 came out towards the end of that period, 1998. And along with a number of other guides, I wrote a guide for the Environment Agency on applying Mike 11, using Mike 11 to look at the impact of intermittent discharges. And I think there's a WAPUG note floating around, a must read, number 36, I believe. I'm not sure you can get hold of it anymore, but anyway. So there were quite a few bits of guidance that I wrote at that time. Then moving on to AMP3, AMP3, I took a career break to do a PhD. And when we started, AMP3 was very much focused on CSOs, combined sewer overflows, intermittent discharges, and their impact on the receiving water. And we'd started at WRC, we started a big contract with Thames Water, sorry, not Thames Water, I beg your pardon, Severn Trent Water, to look at their CSOs and the impact of their CSOs on the River Thames. And I was really lucky enough to take this opportunity to use that project as the basis for my PhD, which I did at Birmingham University. And I looked at taking the software I used our WRC's in-house software, Simpol 3, which I helped to on the development side of it, and looked at implementing some real-time control within that software to see if there was scope for managing a sewer network actively, and what benefit that would be for the receiving water. So that for me, that took up most of that AMP period, but it was a really challenging time. And I have to say, actually, doing that PhD, stuck in this very room at this very desk, it was superb training for the COVID lockdown, I have to say. Moving on to AMP4, by this time I've been promoted up to senior consultant within the pollution management group, and we were really cementing our integrated catchment modelling and building on Simpol 3. Another notable project that I was involved with at that time, towards the end of that period, was the Thames Tideway tunnel. We've been involved in, again, this project for many years actually, and I took on this project when Paul Dempsey retired, and Paul Dempsey was the father of Simpol, if you like, and we worked very closely together for the whole of my career. And then he retired, and then I took on the leadership of that pollution management, catchment management group, and took on the technical direction of the Thames Tideway tunnel project. And that involved looking at the impact of the tunnel and other combined sewer overflows going into the Thames. And we used a water quality estuary model to look at the impact on dissolved oxygen within the estuary. Moving on to AMP5, again, then became the technical lead within that modelling team. And I got involved with, or WRC really got involved in helping to develop SimCat Sagis. WRC worked with Atkins to help support that SimCat Sagis. I'd been involved in SimCat, if you remember, from the very beginning of my career, and that had been developed to look at different aspects of river catchment modelling, looking at the apportionment of different sources of pollutant and their impact in the river. So that was an interesting time, again, developing a tool to support business planning within the water industry. And then back within WRC, we developed our Simpol software, and I was leading that technical development of Simpol. And this time we were making it a really truly integrated set of piece of software by looking at the whole water cycle, bringing how you can connect up sewer networks and the impact on rivers, how you can look at the customer demand and their demand for clean water. Where's that clean water come from? And looking at abstractions from groundwater, abstractions from surface water, and really modelling that whole cycle so you can see how all these different components interact. And I think it's really important that when we're investigating any system, we look at those components and how they behave together. And then I got involved in writing yet more guides. This one was for UK Were, looking at modelling intermittent discharges. You can still get hold of this. And if you're in your early careers and you want to know a bit more about how to model, then obviously I wrote it, but I do think it's aimed at early careers people and non-technical people. So it is a good option to go for. Moving on to AMP6. AMP6, I did do yet more modelling. This UPM and impact modelling is the connection between all those AMP periods. So more modelling, we did some big projects with Thames Water. And then I became a principal consultant within WRC. And it was quite a busy period for me with CIWEM as well. I became a member of the Climate Change Network panel, and I also became a committee member for the Urban Drainage Group. And I finally got around to doing my chartership and became a fellow. So it was a really, really busy period, and quite an exciting one as well. And then finally, AMP7. Well, in a way, my career has kind of come full circle. We're still looking at CSOs. We're still looking at fecal coliforms, fecal indicator organisms and their impact in the rivers and in the coastal areas. But now we've got the added challenge of climate change and achieving net zero. So lots of exciting challenges and projects to come up. So that's my AMP cycle career. It's been interesting actually reflecting on where I have come from, and one of the things that we're talking about is what would I say to myself, my younger self, if I had that opportunity to give myself some advice. Well, I thought about a few things, and I thought, well, one thing I've always thought is if somebody gives you an opportunity, just go for it. You don't. It's really flattering to be asked to do something, and just go for it, and you'll get support. So try not to turn opportunities down. get involved. And often when you're starting out, it's quite daunting, I think. But if you just throw yourself in the new members group, for example, it's a great way to get to know others and build your confidence. And confidence is such a key thing, I think, to building that career. Also, I would say get a mentor or someone that's going to help you and give you that little support. If you've got those questions, get someone to just provide that guidance. And also ask questions, and don't be shy about it. And we're so worried about making a fool of ourselves asking questions. And somebody told me a Chinese proverb the other day, which I've not heard before. And it was, he who asks a question is foolish for 5 minutes. But if you don't ask that question, you can be foolish for a lifetime. And I think that really resonated with me. And often I give quite a lot of training and I say, look, you just ask anything. It don't matter if you think it's silly, because you can just bet the person next to you is going to say, oh, thank goodness they asked that question. So ask why all the time. And make sure you really enjoy what you're doing. When I started, I was a senior member at work, and he said, you've got to enjoy work. You're in it for a long time, and you've really got to enjoy it. If you don't like it, find something else, because if you don't enjoy it, you won't give it your best, and you are a long time at work. So that's all I have to say. I think we've run out of time for my bit. So yeah, I'm open to questions.
Apologies, my microphone just stopped. I just couldn't unmute my microphone. My fault, that's all my fault. Thank you, Karen. Fantastic presentation and a very good journey. I think that gives us a lot to think as new members in the industry. And with what you said, ask questions, don't be shy. I think we can start our session, like we have 5-10 minutes for questions. So just everyone put your questions on the Q&A tab and Dr. Karen will answer. So I can start. Cam is asking, how does it feel to have worked for the same company for years?
Well, there's a number of reasons why I've stayed at the same company, and there are always pros and cons, actually, to whether you stay within one company or whether you move around. You can gain a lot of experience in different types of company when you move around. But for me, the reason why I stayed at WRC is because I've really quite enjoyed the variety of work. I've tried to give you a bit of a flavour of that variety, but I've really enjoyed that variety. I've had the good fortune really to work with, I think, every water company and every regulator at various points in my career. I've done a number of different jobs, and although I've stayed within the same kind of specific field, if you like, but the benefit for me is really that I've really cemented my knowledge, and I've really got a solid understanding of that. So, and I think that for me has been really good. And also the other reason I've stayed at WRC is because I've put a lot of time and investment into the development of our integrated catchment model, SIMPOL. I adopted part of its development for my PhD. I kind of grew up with its development through the early years of the UPM procedure, and taking that on now. So, and it's still developing, and I love the fact it is a very flexible tool, and if we want to do a particular study, we can just circle with the code and put that functionality in, and so that gives us flexibility to say yes, we can do that. Yeah, we'll just change the code, and then we'll give you a tool, and we'll do that assessment. So that's why I've stayed.
Okay, so next question from Jessica, looks quite popular. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. What would you say is your proudest professional achievement?
I think for me, I won't ever forget the day I got my PhD. And that was so bound up with the work that I did at WRC. So I still think of that as part of my professional career at WRC. I I really wanted to do a PhD, so I was quite driven to do that. I am quite driven when it's something I really want to do, and it was such an achievement. It was a lot of hard work because although I took a career break, it wasn't a complete break. I was still sort of keeping my hand in at work. I didn't leave WRC. I just worked at home for a while, and a lot of it was working in the evening. One of the reasons I could use the tools and all the data we were using for a commercial contract with Severn Trent Water was that I did the work during the day and then I did my PhD in the evening. But that was a real sense of achievement for me to get that done. And I think actually, you know, there's been sort of layers of achievement. There hasn't been one sort of defining moment. There's been lots of layers that have just built up. I feel a bit like a tree, you know, there's rings. So yeah, not one, perhaps not one defining moment, but that does stand out for me. I mean, that was my sort of done it.
Yeah. Next one. What do you think is the biggest challenge faced by our industry now and in the future?
I think it's I think climate change is such a challenge for every aspect of what we do. I know, so you know, there's that poses challenges for everything. I think perhaps for the water industry in particular, not just that broad brush climate change, which we need to think about every aspect of our work. How does climate change fit into this? How does net zero fit into this? It's got to be so integral in what we do these days. It can't be just a kind of an add-on. But I think that's the same for everything. The other thing I'd say, particularly for the water industry, is it's probably not the most glamorous industry. And I think we have a challenge of hanging on to skills and, you know, particularly sort of the sort of younger career people now. I think it's easier to move around. So I think we are possibly challenged with maintaining that skills, keeping those skills, enhancing those skills, because if we want to deliver really good, innovative solutions, we're going to need really good, talented people to do that, and hanging on to those talented people when they could go and apply their skills elsewhere. I think skills are much more transferable these days, data scientists and GIS, and you know, you can apply it in the water industry, you can apply it elsewhere. But if as a water industry want to hang on to those skills and develop those skills, that's a bit of a challenge, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So another one from Sergio. Hi, Karen. Thank you for the talk. What are your thoughts on the widespread plastic, microplastic pollution in our waters? Is that a problem just here to stay?
Yes. I mean, I think until the way that the water industry and the regulation is structured at the moment, there's no compulsion for the water industry to do much about it unless we've got some legislation in place to make that happen. Because expenditure is so tightened down, everything is so buttonholed to achieve regulation, achieve compliance with regulations. If we don't have that legislative fist, if you like, saying you've got to do this, because I think there'll be lots of motivation to do it, but I doubt whether there'll be that incentive to do it, because it will need investment, and it's a difficult thing, and it's the water companies have to pick up what we as consumers do. So it's not just the water companies having to deal with this problem. It runs right back through to us as consumers and our behaviour and the whole attitude to plastics and microplastics. So it's not just for the water companies to be told you need to make sure you haven't got microplastics in your final effluent and blah blah blah. And they don't break down during the process so that we can't capture them. It's up to all of us. So I think it's a massive problem, and one that will need addressing. A wholesale look at how we deal with microplastics. It's not easy.
There's not just one answer to it. So yeah. A question from Josh. Thank you for your story, Karen. May I ask you to reiterate the introduction to modeling material you discussed in AMP5? Did you enjoy developing training software?
I didn't hear the first bit of that. Do I enjoy developing training software?
Yeah,
I do. I've given a lot of training actually. I used to do a lot of training with SIMCAT for the Environment Agency in particular. We've just been delivering our latest set of UPM urban pollution management training, and it's quite fun. It's really enjoyable to sort of work with people and teach them, and they come out of it with much more confidence. So I do quite enjoy that bit in the classroom, and it's been a challenge at the moment because we've had to convert some of our training to online training, and trying to make that accessible. And obviously you haven't got that sort of two-way process. I like when I'm in the classroom, I like sort of that interaction and really getting to ask people questions. What do you think about this? How would you do this? And that's difficult to do in an online forum, but it is good. It's exhausting actually. I find it's more exhausting the older you get, but it is good fun. I do quite like doing it. Yeah.
Great. One last one, and this is coming from me. What are the differences you see between opportunities for career now and when you started, and the way the industry is performing and working? Like, is there a massive difference? And do you think there are equal opportunities for women in the urban drainage industry as men? Because as a woman, yeah, I'm sure you have your own experiences. So,
well, goodness. I'll sit back.
Yeah, quite direct question. You can skip the second part and answer.
No, not at all. I think when I started, there were very few women in the industry. Actually, I was the only female in the group when I started. Although to be honest, I was quite used to that because right from when I was doing my A-levels at school, I was the only girl I did maths, physics and chemistry, and I was the only one in that group. So I was quite used to that environment. And even my first degree was quite male dominated, but not so much so. But I've noticed obviously now there's a bit of a flip actually. I think in some groups we've got more women than men. I think in terms of the way the water industry perhaps operates. So when I started, so with WRC, we were privatized and we had really big research projects that would run for several years. And the water industry has moved to much shorter timescale projects. Obviously, we're in this AMP cycle, this 5-year investment cycle, and it's a sort of this boom and bust. You work to get a research project out, and they're quite short. They run for 6 months, or maybe a year, and then you start another one. So the research projects, the ones that underpin a lot of the fundamentals of the work that we do, are much shorter now. And I think we probably don't have the specialism that when I started, there was somebody who was a specialist in this and another specialist and another specialist. And I think these days, it's probably more generalists and people having perhaps wider experience, but not being quite so specialised. That's just the experience I've had. That may not be reflected elsewhere. So, and it was certainly when I started, it was a very much more formal environment as well. I mean, we didn't have email for one thing. We had mainframe. We didn't even have personal computers. and we had a typing pool, and you could smoke in the office. So, you know, that feels like an age ago, and it's all very different now. But I think, as I was talking about the AMP cycle, I'm not convinced this 5-year planning cycle is helpful, particularly when we've got really big issues to deal with, like climate change and microplastics, and these really long-term projects. And I think we need to have another mechanism for looking at those long-term projects. You talked about women and are the opportunities there for women. I think they are much improved, certainly in the early careers. I think it's very much more if you're good at your job, you're passionate about your job, and you can show that initiative, you will get where you want to go. And I don't think there's that sort of gender issue in the certainly in the early careers. I don't think we can say that about the top jobs. They're still very male dominated. There are very few women in executive positions, and that needs to be addressed. I think there's still this glass ceiling, and so we've got this gender imbalance, and there is still a gender pay gap. So, but I think it's improving. It will work through the ranks, but it will be nice if it was addressed a bit more aggressively. I think to give, men and women have different approaches on the way we tackle things. A lot of men get to the top because they're naturally more risk takers, naturally have much greater self-belief in themselves. And I think, and that's generally, that's not, I know that's not the same for every person, but I think particularly women and early careers people, the best thing you can do is really build your confidence and cement your knowledge, but build your confidence. You can achieve so much if you're very confident. So that's my one of the things I would say. It's just get confident by trying things, and it doesn't matter if you fail as long as you learn from those failures. But I think we can all do with a bit more, getting our confidence, and those questions that I highlighted, you can see on the slide. I think those will help build confidence as well.